Okay.
You good? Do I have to lock it? Sorry. We good, check.
Mhm.
Okay, very good. Good evening. I would like to call the September Policy Committee meeting to order. It is 6:02 p.m. If I can do roll call, Swarthmore, here, Ms. Williams, here, Ms. Whitsett, here, Ms. Delay, here, and special appearance by Ms. Heller. Glad to have you. If we can move to approving the minutes from the June 4th meeting, have a motion to approve. So moved. Ms. Whitsett, thank you. You know, taking up a vote on moving that forward. We're going to move forward. Okay, so good sense. Very good. With regard to our meeting protocols, just as a reminder from last year, when we do have public comments, we have a 3-minute time limit. We ask that public hold their questions to the end of the topic being discussed. And it is not necessarily time for board members to answer those questions. If we do have answers, we may give them, but we maybe just need some more time to determine exactly what the question is and make sure that we're getting back to community members with as much information as we can. So, good evening. Having said that, we'll move over to an update from the superintendent on the summer policy.
Thank you, Dr. Salini. And thank you, Jackie, for calling up the presentation. I am really pleased as we start the school year to give our committee an update on the implementation of the new policy and really answer any questions and think about how we move forward. Because, you know, implementing a policy that went through so much deliberation, right? It's such good thinking. Really does require us just to keep it alive and continue to kind of nurture it. Just having a policy alone won't make it so. We want that joyful, focused, interactive learning environment for our students. And it takes work. It takes work of the administration and our teachers, our families, and of course, this board and administration. So really just want to update you. Here we are, having completed our first full week of school, and just let you know where we are right now. And of course, answer any questions that you have. So with that, just to take us inside, we have launched the school year with several different types of resources and supports. And I will actually walk you through each one of these. I won't read all of these boxes to you right now, but the idea is that we have a comprehensive array of resources and supports to make sure that we really show that this is a change. This is not the world as we knew it last year. We do want this year to be, again, more joyful, more interactive, and more focused for our students as a result of putting these resources and supports in place that will help us with the implementation of the policy. And just also add that I am planning to provide an update to the full board about this as part of my superintendent's comments later in September as well. Again, but in service of that conversation, it won't be at every meeting, but since we're doing this in committee meetings this month, I'll also talk about it for board meeting. And I'll explain why some of these things will come into greater focus between now and the board meeting. So just starting with family information. Where, you know, our families are, of course, our children's first educators. And so we really wanted to make sure that our families were aware of the change in the policy before the school year began. So I did send a letter. I know you can't read that here. I had shared it with the board as well. The letter to our families about what they should know about the policy. And I did appreciate the input that I received on it both internally and externally. And I do know that, you know, a point of questioning was about at the high school level, where students, what I wrote in this letter about where students should put their devices, what does it mean to have a secure location? And so glad to open that up for any conversation tonight as well. But we wanted to signify that there is a specific location in the classroom that students need to store their phones during class time. And that's that it could be a cubby, it could also be a backpack. And I just want to acknowledge that that was part of this letter, and of course answering questions. In addition to family resources, there at the beginning of the school year, our outreach to families, we also needed to make sure that we are instructing students, and instructing students really begins with instructing our faculty. And so our principals all made plans and executed on plans to make sure that the teachers understood what was different about the policy this year, that it wasn't the same as what it was last year. I actually had a chance to include this as part of my convocation address as well, giving examples like, when we reach the end of a period where maybe students are taking an assessment and they get done early. I know the one thing that I heard about, I didn't see this myself in the past, but that was a time when students would look at their phones in class. And so helping teachers understand that planning for what will be different now is very necessary to really totally, embody this change. And so all of our schools were able to provide students with instruction at the beginning of the school year. Here's Mr. Polk from Mr. Benzing's weekly update that he sent out last week. And we do know that, so it was important for the teachers to talk about it in the classroom. It was also important for the principals to talk about it with students at the school level. So continuing on with the theme of the high school, last week during the student assemblies that Mr. Benzing was teaching, right? They were able to walk students through the expectations related to self-employed in school as an entire student body. So all the students were hearing it at once from the administration, and they were getting about it from their teachers with this visual and it's ongoing work with our students in particular, the instruction we're getting. But I think we're off to a good start, but making sure that it happened and that it's clear and our message and on point. Then another really important change that we had to put in place in order to enact the policy is to make sure that our student handbooks were consistent with what's in the policy, and particularly around consequences for having a phone particularly on as you have potential repeat offenders in the classroom. And so I was pleased that this summer all of our schools updated their handbooks. In fact, I'm particularly pleased the high school has fully launched its full handbook for the start of the school year, and really making sure that all these pieces are important. I feel like this is central to work related to making sure that there's clear information for students, and that there's an unwritten code of conduct, but that instead it's very clearly delineated. I think that's an important equity issue. So we're pleased to see that the handbooks were all updated and released to students prior to the start of the school year and on our website. We also are wanting to make sure that we just put out reminders about the policy and what's changed. And so our communications team put together this new graphic. We wanted to show students, again, engaged together, an image that shows sort of part of the heart and soul of Strathaven, image, of course, is the football games that I've enjoyed going to. Now, it's not all the way our students are engaged, but it's meant to be a visual. What does it look like to be living your life instead of looking down at your phone? So focusing forward instead of looking down is what we're wanting to sort of convey with this image. We can certainly come up with more as the school year goes on, because I think it's important to keep it fresh. But we've been sort of sharing this through Peach Jar and through our social media and on our webpage to again just get the message out that there's something better for our students than being sucked into your phones. In addition, what will change during this month is now that we have our first week of school under our belts, I will start my school observation. So I started this week with high school on Thursday, and Dr. Baddick and I will be visiting one school per week and looking around to see what do we see. So I think laying eyes on what actually is occurring in our schools. Very, very important. I'm also pleased that board members will start to visit schools with me. And we'll start on September 19th, a small group of us for middle school. So I think we're starting, two really important places to look. Now that won't be different than we're looking forward to our schools. It's obviously the teaching and learning that we're most excited and most interested in seeing. But I will always be keeping my eye for to what extent are our students using devices overall, and particularly personal devices. I do on the first day of school, I made sure to go back to the high school just to get a feel for lunch and what was happening during lunch. Keeping in mind that cell phones, personal electronic devices can start lunch. And on the first day, I was pleased to see very, very phones. And again, going on a joyous, interactive, focused learning environment, even at lunch. I saw the joy, I saw the interactivity. The place where I saw phones the most, and again, they are allowed right now, under the policy, is for the students who weren't in the cafeteria. If you're in the cafeteria, or even if you were outside, a lot of our students go outside to eat, that tend to be pods of students talking and interacting together, and they have seen a phone out, but I didn't see students sort of, looking down at their phones and not interacting with each other. And predominantly, I didn't see phones out. Where I did see students with phones is if you went to some of the more auxiliary places where students were eating alone, those were instances where I did see students using phones. And so it's just important when we think about implications for if there are future iterations of this policy, what is it, who is it affecting? And I don't mean that it's just what I saw in relation to on that first day. But I want to get that baseline. I wanted to see data. In addition, I will continue to have focused discussions about this topic. So I've arranged for a meeting with the Vodafone leadership later this month just to hear from them about what they see in the way of implementation. I'm looking forward to that discussion. Will also be an opportunity for me to introduce our new instructional technology supervisor, Caitlin Keck, who's on to a great start with us here, and to really form that bridge because there are other topics that I know that want to go into further as well around just overall use of electronics and devices and AI. So just a great opportunity to have that conversation. And again, with this idea that we need to continue to support our families, the letter that I sent at the beginning of the year, it was important, but it's certainly not truly really get to the better, the deep understanding that parents need to have about what role are phones and social media having on our children's lives. So at this time, we are planning on 3 sessions for families during the school year. One will be a differentiated session on, or we're planning to, I should say, I'm not going to go quite so far as to say will until we fully execute on contracts, but our plan right now is a session devoted to internet and social media safety, which we differentiated from between elementary and secondary, because the importance of the message being, clearer and tailored to those groups of students. A second session on screen time in the adolescent brain, and then a third that's more preventative in nature, proactive in nature, about the power of play and how we want to really help families understand how important play is for child development for their future. So that's what we have planned right now. We're making additional sessions, family resource and support sessions coming up during the school year. And again, we'll be bringing some contracts for September or perhaps October for approval to be able to move forward with the member school and help us with those sessions. And then finally, the evaluation is really important, and it begins now, right, with even just anecdotal observations and being in classrooms. We do need to make sure that we have a thorough evaluation of this first year of implementation. So it's very much on the mind. And Kate McKen will help with that, our instructional technology supervisor. And so that will be part of the conversation that we have with some of the resident experts. We can hold the film, we'll have some ideas for that, but we have some internal ideas as well, particularly using existing data, so that we can sort of have an apples to apples comparison of what do we see in the change of, for example, student disability for us in the school, and particularly student disability for us for things related to either a proxy or directly to the use of someone's social media. So we're really excited about these things coming together. I hope it feels like we are working to embody the thrust of this policy, the spirit of this policy, and of course, because we're open. We want to make this. We want this to be strong. And we want to make sure that our students have the type of learning we want for them, which from in part to effective implementation of this policy. The one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about student instruction is also ongoing information. The policy also talks about digital literacy, for instance, and making sure that's part of our curriculum. So that's also something we need to work on during the school year, particularly in places like our PE health classes, with our health teachers, they're going to support that message, but really all throughout the curriculum. But I want to be specific with the board, exactly where is that happening. So that's another. So that is just a quick update, and of course, welcome any questions.
Thank you very much for putting this together and for recognizing it is a really big change from the very first policy meeting of the new school year. Bringing this forward is another manifestation of how seriously that you are taking it and administration's taking it. So really want to thank you for that. I think I'm going to pass to other committee members for questions. The only thing I'll offer is that I know I know you're talking a lot, keeping in touch with the Haven Film Group, which I also appreciate so much. They've, just in the today and in the last like 48 hours, shared with me, some upcoming things that they're involved in.
Yes.
That I'm hopeful that we're making, to the extent that we can. The one is like a Wednesday night thing, so it's coming up really quickly. But hopefully they're sharing this, that we can share them back out through the Keach Jar or other instances that are available. If they're a resource, capacity is great too. We can share that with the, district this week.
If you don't mind, I'm really happy to comment on that very briefly
Yes,
about so they have the screening of screenagers.
Yes.
On September
We
24th.
did share that.
They did go on.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
And so, we're really glad to do everything we can to just, again, promote this overall, what do government need to know about, the devices that we as parents are getting our children access to. So it's a little bit of a fine line because there is a cost to attend, and so we can't overly promote it, but so we're looking for ways to make sure that we're just talking about it, that,
Right.
it's coming up on September 24th, it's $10, but it's something that we're deterred away, for that pending, and so we're looking to see what we can do. That's right.
Great. Thank you.
I would just say thank you as well. I mean, we're what, day 5, I know, and like we've already had enough. One of the things I think,
No, sure, keep going.
one of the things as a committee, I've heard over and over again was like, you're passing the policy, but what's gonna be the follow-up? What's gonna be the follow-up? And so I really think I appreciate your efforts to make it credible and have some teeth to it and write down the dates. And, we were all pretty clear that this was a starting point. It wasn't a final destination. So I like that we're kind of testing some of it, and we'll get some evaluations and we can kind of fine tune it a little bit. So I'm really appreciative of how you rolled it out.
I don't have any comment. But I do want to share that there is a resource that is tomorrow night. It's a webinar.
Okay.
I forwarded it to you.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you.
It's why kids can't put down their cell phones, the power of persuasive design, with Dr. Richard Freed. And he wrote 2 books on cell phone use, and he's done a lot of research. And Alex Bergbecker, I think she's part of Haven Hold the Phone. She sent it, and I sent it to Christine, Michelle, and Mary Jo.
I got it.
Yeah, I did say, I didn't know if people got it,
Sure.
but,
I actually responded to her and I asked her because I can't attend it tomorrow night, but she said there's also gonna be taped that we can go back and watch it, so. I'll be looking for that. She said she'd let me.
yeah.
So,
That's something that I think we could coordinate better, because that could be announced through Peach Jar.
Mhm.
If we had gotten it like 2 weeks ahead of time. That, so that because it says share it with your colleagues or
Sure.
people in the community that might be interested. And
Mhm.
I just got the email yesterday, I think.
Okay, sure. Sure.
Perhaps the recording could share.
I was gonna say, so I'm typing some notes as we're discussing, if the recording becomes available, then somebody like I can share it on the.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I really appreciate you being the ground running this, as you mentioned, it was a long time coming and a lot of work, and I also really appreciate the connections that you've made with our community about this and the feedback we've received from them incorporating. One thing, and we did get a chance to talk about it, that was a little bit of a question for me was the reference to high schoolers being able to keep the phones in their backpacks. That felt, so let me preface it by saying that that's in the AR policy. So obviously that is something that Typically, we as a board, that can change, whereas the policy we would need to vote on, obviously. That's a little bit more, that can evolve and change without that board involvement, but, that piece for me did feel like a little bit of a difference from the conversation we had when we discussed the AR. The AR uses language like secure storage area, mentions a lockable box or designated shelf where phones must be placed at the beginning of each class. But again, I understand that sort of shift was made after conversations were had with other stakeholder groups. So, I just wanted to acknowledge that was a little bit of a difference to me, when I saw that, and to get a chance to talk about it. I appreciated that. And, again, that is, within, the AR is the AR, and that is something that, we would necessarily have to think on every decision that's made there. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, though. And then the other question I had was, so when we voted on the policy, we included in the resolution that it would be assessed mid-year this year and then end of year. So, and we also talked about that we would be setting goals that we would report out on publicly. So my question is, when can we expect those goals to be publicly available?
Sure.
And, just wanting them to be measurable. We talked a lot about teacher redirection when we discussed this policy. And, for example, I think it was at the high school level, and this was for our own internal survey. I think it was 92% of teachers reported needing to redirect anywhere from 1 to greater than 10 times a period. So that was time away from instruction. So I offer that as one data point that we already have collected. That I'm hoping will be a focus on the assessment. And again, keeping it measurable, keeping it public so we all know, what it is that we're working towards. And then, ultimately it would make sense to me to talk about what is the threshold, what does that need to look like? But maybe these are big questions for now. Just want to put that out there.
Yes, all good points. Thank you very much. And I appreciate that we want to have a chance to talk about the first topic as well. Really appreciate that. Just over that about this one. So regarding the evaluation, so my goal is this fall. I don't have a specific, I always talk in seasons if I don't know exactly which month. So I do know that it will be a fall determination or not what we do the evaluation. Like I said, we're really just right now trying to gather ideas for how to conduct the evaluation. And wanted to make sure that it's, hopefully something that we can then repeat so we can see change over time. Making with Kate Cat is ready to go. She's rolled up her sleeves and really jumped in the game. Like I said, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have a meeting with her in September with Kate as well. So we're putting the pieces together and I'm very confident. So I can tell that we're moving in the direction of having an answer. So just yet. So I'll continue to stay fall until I can know a little bit more exactly which month this fall, but I'm excited about it. Because planning it now means we're going to be so much more successful in execution rather than rushing the figure. So we're already, it's in the works. So
I have a question that I thought that the district was going to purchase those caddies like you see in the picture for every classroom in the high school. That was my understanding. And now you're saying it can be in a backpack or on a designated shelf.
sure.
Which a teacher that's engaged in instruction can have their eyes on who said they're going to the bathroom and sneak by their backpack and take their phone out. And then it's up to the hall monitors to step in. That can get kind of sketchy. So
We did not.
why isn't that happening?
Sure. So we did, over the summer, we had a lot of internal discussion about how to begin the school year, how to make this change happen in the district well. And I'm putting together a lot of variables, overall, definitely needs to not have their access to public class. I take that seriously. We also didn't want to get into a lot of power shortages. We do know that there would be a handful, there would be students for whom putting the phone into a cubby is really the big challenge as well, and there's a discipline associated with that. And so we try to think of like, what are the options that are, yes, the cubbies, yes, the shelf. Is a backpack also an acceptable location for the phone, and one that, and could that be considered a secure location if you have to put it in your backpack and the backpack is away from you? Is that a secure location? And and I'm not trying to call it the AR at all. The AR has, it says, for example, so to me, we have the ability to consult with experts as well. It wasn't just high school administration, and we had this conversation, did look to external experts on this topic and asked about, what do you do? We have there can be a range of ways that a student has to store the phone securely away from themselves. But what can a backpack be one of those places? And I was appreciative of a perspective from external expertise that said that we don't want the students handling the phones. So if they have to put it in the cubby at the beginning of class, and they leave the class out of the cubby, now they've got their phone right in front of them as they're walking along. And having it in the backpack is actually a place where it's getting closer to our goal of the student not having as much ongoing contact with the phone, because they're repeating that 4 or 5 times a day between 4th and 5th block, where they are, constantly handling that, having their phone right in front of them. Their faces the way that we don't want them to. And so I was actually pleased when I turned to, again, thinking about what are the options from within the classroom that, what can constitute secure. And we're trying to, again, we were really trying to take this in a very thoughtful way of where there would sort of reduce power struggles between teachers and students, that would reduce students interacting with their phones. And so we did add backpacks as an option in the classroom. And then you can see where we had a teacher that, once they have these, they can use their cubbies. But we also said that if, a backpack can be a secure location in addition to the shelf for the cubbies. So it was really just trying to understand the reality of what this is going to be like in the classroom on day one. And what I'm hearing so far is so far, it's too early to bless this in any way, shape, or form. But I am hearing that people get it, that this is a difference this year, and it's not the same as it was last year. And we are, having instructional periods that are not, where students don't have access to the same.
Okay, but that doesn't answer the question that it was brought up that the district, I think it wasn't okay with that the district would provide the teachers with the cubbies or money to purchase the cubbies. So maybe it's through a reimbursement, they buy it from a teacher's education spot and they're reimbursed, because that makes it consistent throughout the high school, that they're learning to put the phone in the cupboard. And
Sure.
That means you can't get it out when you're going to the bathroom. It's bell to bell.
So, yeah, having it in the backpack doesn't mean you can definitely get it out. Nothing is foolproof, to tell you the truth, because students can put a burner phone in the cubby as well. And so, the student who really wants access to their phone is probably going to take their phone there. However, if we gave the teachers options, we said that we're taking this very seriously, we're serious about this. Phone does need to be in a secure location. If you want to use cubbies, we'll support that financially. We will, and I'm sure this will continue to evolve during the year. Teacher might change how they want to store their phones. But what I'm saying is we gave the teachers options, and we are supportive of the options. So if they want a cubby, we're providing them a cubby. If they want to use a shelf, they can use a shelf. But we are not holding back from supporting teachers with what they need. in order to affect this policy, to make this change.
Actually, I didn't, did you have any question? No, I did not. So this is really, really interesting to me. And like, I come at it, especially with the evaluation portion, because I was in like that, I worked in a program evaluation for 25 years. So I'm really looking at this, like, this would be a great natural experience, experiment, honestly. You have, everybody's in the same building. But eventually, I'm really, really happy that you're thinking about it at the beginning, because so many evaluations just happen at the end. And they're like, well, what happened? And so, it's just harder on the person who's charged with doing the evaluation if they weren't collecting data and they didn't even know what questions needed to be answered, from the very beginning. And so, I like the idea of having goals. I'll just like do a little thing. I would say also try to think of questions that you want answered, like really like, because that's where it'll really come down to. And yeah, make sure to build in, because everybody's really interested in how is it working with the backpack versus the not backpack. And so let's try to build that into the evaluation, both qualitatively and quantitatively. And maybe the data will somehow triangulate to giving us a better, richer answer. And I mean, I just think it's fascinating. And it has to, these things aren't necessarily always cut and dried. There's a balance to be made when we have human beings that we're enacting a policy upon, which then turns into a program. And really, you're doing a program. You're not really evaluating the policy as much as you're evaluating what you have to do to implement it on the ground. So, I mean, sorry, this is just super interesting. And yeah, I was like, wait, what backpacks, but now I kind of see the logic, and I'm super interested to know how it's going to work out. And yeah, and if teachers change over time, one or the other, if maybe they have different classes that they instituted in,
Right.
depending on the student body, I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, it'll be interesting.
Yes, thank you.
I think what came to my mind while you were talking was in terms of that feedback, we did this from the beginning, but we would certainly want to continue the teacher voice in that in particular, separate and distinct from administrators, students, families. And I think it was somebody hit on it, like that redirection number of times that they were needing to redirect. And I'd love to know, does that feel like that is lessened since the policy was implemented? So it's great to have a baseline.
Right, yeah, thank you. Absolutely.
Any other board member questions or people? And then can we open it up on this for feedback from the audience then, or questions from the audience? Sure. I would like to do that so we don't have to pay our huge audience.
Thank you. Well, I'm Marianne Gazelle. I have two boys. I have a sophomore and a senior. And I just want to say thank you so much. You guys definitely hurt me a lot, but I feel like now the administration is really hearing like what we need. I've been, since my senior was in 6th grade, I've been like against cell phones in the classroom and went to Dr. Sanka and like just nothing happened. So I really appreciate all your work. And I just want to say thank you. But I do have questions. So with the consequences, are the teachers responsible for that? Like what happens when a kid goes to their backpack and pulls their phone out? Like what happens? Do the teachers say their phone back and then they get like a little check mark for being bad, and then like 2 check marks are there? Do they get an occurrence? Like I don't know, how do you keep track of all that?
Yeah, I think it's with anything that happens in the classroom, it really is the discretion of the teacher.
Okay.
And what happened was the student, did they, what's the context for why the student has the phone? And therefore then what has to happen. So really it's the teacher's decision whether or not to label it as it would constitute a minor infraction on the list of other potential minor infractions. And, you know, they'll be following them.
And so all the minor infractions will be tallied, and
Yes,
then and so at the end of this experiment, or, you know, but maybe like December, we can see how many there are, and then
yes,
the end of the school year.
yes.
Okay, all right. With where the phones are gonna go, I have to say I totally agree with that. That having them in the backpack is just a bad idea. The kid, if the backpacks need to be away from them, and if you're not in the classroom, for all the backpacks to be like away, like let the kids in the backpacks are right there.
Mhm.
I just think it really should be consistent, so the kids know. Every classroom, we go in, we put our phones here. And we made a good point about taking the phones out, and then they're looking at them. They're getting their backpacks and they're going right in there, you know, whether it's in their pocket, like, or they're in their hoodie, like, they're going right in there. So I don't know how to solve that problem, but I think that backpacks are not a great idea for the high schoolers, just needs to be away. And what about ear pods? Are we doing anything with those?
Yes.
We are.
So that's why when I sent the letter to campus, we wanted to put right at the beginning, what constitutes an electronic device, I included that in the list. And to be honest with you, the principals and I spent a lot of time this summer talking about how we're implementing policy and making sure that we do it thoughtfully and respectfully to our students. And so with regards to AirPod or similar device, watches, we're not checking students.
Okay.
So it's not like we're saying, show me your wrist.
Okay,
or
right,
show me
right,
your
of
wrist. And that sounds crass, but it does, we really want to make sure we guide the teachers well.
Of course.
And so, yeah, what we are promoting is the idea is that we see you with it, we see you with the watch, we see you with the AirPod, then it constitutes an infraction.
Okay.
And we're letting families know that this does count
Yeah,
as part of this part of the policy. And letting the students know that it counts. But we had some good conversation this summer about, and again, I'm going to get a little bit crassier, but you know, we don't want to create a police state around this. We want to make sure that boards are creating that dignified, respectful learning environment, and the students don't get targeted. You know?
I totally get it.
Yeah.
I just did that, Hold Phone did like a experiment with the teachers, sent a survey out, and AirPods are like one of the things they like get these out of the classroom, as well as phones. That they just like they have to, you know, talk about the kids, take them out, or it's just kind of nightmare. Anyway. When you were in the high school, what did you see with like kids in the hallways? Were they looking at their phones? Were they? What?
I need a little more time because I
assess?
went during lunch. I've been there during a passing period since. I was not struck by an abundance of phones. You have to move quickly. You have to
Right,
deal with them.
right.
Nothing about it made me think, because it's back on what I saw, but I will get it, which one of them. Then I'll be back this Thursday, so I'll just want to see more.
Okay.
Important to continue to watch because I think moderation is hard. So that's why I'm concerned about the high school, like, it's, we're allowing for moderation.
Right.
And what one is looking like, so that's why I wanted to see much on day one and on.
Right. We have one more question. No. So are we talking to the teachers and seeing how they feel about all this change? Are they on board? And how do we know they're being compliant with having the phones away?
Right.
I know that was a problem last year, and it definitely is a problem that when the kids have done, they get their phones back, like in 5 minutes, it's like, instead of, you know, chatting with your friend, it's like, here, take your phone. Like, how do we know that that's not happening and that the phones are actually away?
Right, and that's the administrative presence in the classroom,
Okay.
and also supporting the teachers, so we will listen to the teachers through the evaluation process.
Okay.
In fact, Mr. Benson particularly already sent survey to his teachers
Oh, great.
to understand what they needed. Now, it wasn't something that's from larger consumption.
Oh.
But it was a
Right.
way that we wanted to hear
That's
from
great.
them about the implementation.
Oh,
So he did do that,
that's great.
and yeah, I will keep up with that.
They hear your voice.
Yes.
Anyway, last question. Chromebooks. Like, I know they're great, but kids definitely are on there. They can bypass whatever the security is in the high school. They know the password and it's all in there. They're probably mad that I'm talking about it, but I don't know. Is there any way to kind of not have them be able to get into like YouTube and I don't know what else games they're playing on there, and, you know, even though the phone's your way, they're still able to kind of.
They
Pull
can
the
go to
system.
what's up.
Yes, yeah, they know, they can
right.
pretty much do anything,
Yeah.
so. You know,
Yeah. I'll need to follow it up.
okay, I mean, they will put the phone in between the Chromebook,
Mhm.
and they will. My son still did that,
Yes.
he told me, I'm like, what?
What?
Not, this was in middle school, but
Okay.
not in high school, but I said, oh my gosh, so yeah, it's they're great, the Chromebooks, but I think sometimes there's like. Too much emphasis on them and not enough, you know, it's more screen time,
Mhm.
anyway,
That is the more screen time is definitely is on my mind. And
Okay.
it's also something I want to watch for when schools this year. And, you know, I think they just said they can, you know, they are a valuable resource. And
yeah, they are, they're great.
really, but how much, all this time adds up for our kids. And so what's that cumulative?
Right.
And when is the best time to use it, or what are times that we really want to use? When it does become that sort of thrilling.
Yeah.
And I am pleased though that we have an instructional technology supervisor, our new person, Kate Cat, she's really thinking about and wanting to work with teachers. To put a shape the effective use of technology, just not broad. So
I just want to say thank you, like, you are amazing. I have like such confidence in you that I think it's all gonna turn around. Just want to say thank you. It's
if
really,
it doesn't, give me a call, then keep at it.
it's really just nice, it's just a nice feeling, right? Like, that's going to do a lot of work to get here. And I think it's really fun together, so thank you. Excellent, thank you, you're welcome.
Didn't realize as we went through that we completely blew our policy on, on public comment, so. And it's not a big deal because we only have one person here, but we're gonna actually talk about the public comment policy a little bit. So when we get to that, we can remind ourselves to follow our own policies.
All right, so if we can, we'll move on to the first reading, policies. And, again, Christina Gallagher is here with us tonight to, assist from that legal perspective on the reason behind some of those policy changes, as everyone understands and knows. Much of our changes to policies come out of either state or federal regulations, school code, and updates that come to us, as well as some local decisions, but the bulk usually comes from those other items. So I will turn it over to Sally.
Yeah, come on. Oh, I have to click share.
Yeah.
Allow. Replacement, yeah.
Um, so first, yes, as Dina said, the majority of these, well, with the exception of the 600s were, derived from, PSBA recommendations and changes in the law. The first, and these are all for first reading. The first policy, 102 academic standards just reflects some changes made to the Pennsylvania state academic standards for the current school year. So those changes are complete.
Any questions? That's a folks on these. No questions, from me. I'll just go down the line. My only, because it's near and dear to my heart, I know we're all aware of this, but the social studies curriculum, it doesn't specifically say grade 6 to 12. So I'm confident that we are getting a science and social studies curriculum for K through 5. But I just want to throw that out there of note, that is something that we're currently. Well, maybe we're going to, start. Do you have any questions? Or we can go back to you?
Um, I have a question, under social studies. I know that Black history is American history, but since it's been designated as Black history, shouldn't there be some reference that that is going to be taught in the school year? Or are you backing away from that because of Trump?
We're not back there.
No, and these titles are simply, Pennsylvania has certain academic standards and they're titled this way. And this policy simply says that the district will adhere to the exact standards that we're required to adhere to under the law. So these titles come from the law, and there is definitely room for the administration to review the curriculum and to it, but these are just simply the titles, not the full content of the materials that.
So I just wondered when I read this, would it be appropriate to incorporate some equity language in a policy like this? Or are we gonna tackle this when we do the equity policy? You know, I think about things like, adding language about access to or meeting individual students' needs, things like that. And I just wondered, I mean, this almost seems like a check the box policy behind this policy, but so to that end, I don't know how much real latitude we have to play around with it, but I know it's something that's a
Yes,
focus of ours, so.
in terms of latitude, equity of access, equity of regional students.
I don't think anything would legally prohibit that being included here. I don't know if it's better addressed in other policies, definitely the committees.
I definitely, in looking at other district policies along the way, should do that when looking at changes to ours. There was another policy that did include language that started to go in that direction. I can't remember if it was ours or not. It was about. Shoot. I think it's a great comment and a push for us. I think it's maybe in that which one is it belong.
We're trying to do more than just a challenge, we're trying to make sure that we can access it.
Yeah. Right. I don't think there's a harm. If it does, it's sort of a policy. And so I hear you saying, adding in not only just the challenge, but the access, so also access the challenge, access the issue. I think that's important and frankly, pretty straightforward. Policy.
Yeah, I can certainly try to add a minor to add edit to. Yeah, equity, okay. Yeah, I can certainly do that after today's meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can always stand this.
My only concern is that it is specifically the policy as 102, which seems to be, as I'm looking at other districts, like it's academic standards. So while I don't have any problem with what you're saying, I don't know that it's the right place to. Like if we have, like 103, I'm looking at a neighboring district, like their 103 is like non-discrimination in school and classroom practices, and then they have an AR and 104 also non-discrimination in employment. So like, if it truly is like about like keeping things kind of in buckets, then I'm saying we don't have it. Because the policy is titled academic state. That's where I get hung up. Yeah, I mean, it would be great if we had that policy. Well, that's what I was gonna say, once we have that, policy, right, once we have it finalized. Yeah.
I thought that there was mention, I don't know whether it was in discussing the AR or not, but there was mention that we were gonna go away from just using the standardized assessments for placement of kids in our district. So, because you can have a child who just doesn't test well. Anxiety, dyslexia, other things, and so their score on a standardized test is gonna be low. Because without an IEP, then there's no designated time. So I thought that there was, I know this is just from the state, but isn't there some mention that our school district is going to use other alternative forms of assessment for academic standards? Because whether or not a child meets it or not depends on how the evaluation is done of the subject. And if you just go with the standardized state academic standards, you could be leaving a child behind that.
Is there language that you're specifically pointing to? Because when I look at it in the guidelines, it does, the district shall assess individual student team and established academic standards, provide assistance for students having difficulty attaining that.
But that's just,
We can't change the standards. The standards are the standards.
no, but I thought that there was going to be alternative. There's other resources of evaluations of standards.
I think that leaves it open though for that.
Yeah,
It doesn't specify.
the policy is probably, doesn't really address how they're going to be assessed, it's just that they will be assessed on those standards. That would only be a KR, right, like how the
Sure.
possibly.
It's, to me, it's very important that we do assess our students relative to the standards, that we know how it, that way we sort of don't lose a target, we would lose rate for enrichment or acceleration. Because the standards group has similar information across students. And I know that in the past, when we didn't evaluate students relative to a standard, there was a lot of, othering of students, and sort of dismissing having low expectations. This is saying we're going to hold the same expectation for all of our students. It's not standardized assessment, is assessing to a set of common standards to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable for all of our students.
I just, okay. I'm just concerned about the inclusion piece, because Black and brown students tend to score lower on standardized testing. And it doesn't mean that they're not. It just means that they can't, it's a difference of someone saying, the question is, do you get your mother's purse? Yes or no? Well, Black or brown child is going to score that as a no, because it's said in their household applicable. A purse is like a change purse. So that's all
Sure.
I'm worried about in this policy being so cut and dry.
Well, it's not, again, it's not standardized testing. It's a value, we say that, we want to make sure that all students are can right. And that's the standard of, what does it mean to be as a first grader, as a second grader? And it's making sure that we're assessing to know what progress our children are making relative to the standard in each grade level. But it's not standardized testing. It's not, graded on the curve or the types of things that, I think where you're talking about where bias can be related. Bias can be present in any type of assessment, and it all has to be, you have to work on bias in assessment. But I know that, this is not saying that we have to use standardized assessment. It's saying, let's make sure that we understand whether or not every single student is learning what they need to learn in first grade. And there can be multiple measures, there should be multiple measures of understanding that. But if we don't assess that, in my experience, groups that have been historically marginalized that are sort of being allowed for a culture of low expectations, if we don't say it, we're actually going to see who's making progress, who's not, what supports these students to make sure they are making progress is really important. But this policy does not say that it has to be standardized assessment. It allows complete openness on how we approach assessment. And I think that to the point that, we're working on this, taking feedback from the board to say, let's make sure that our assessments are culturally appropriate for our students. It's good feedback for us and the administration to take back and work on as we administratively select assessments in the state. Get that into it. But I appreciate that.
I have one more quick question. Financial literacy, I can see that on the list. Is that included in the other, one of these other points? Is that, senior science, is it?
Sorry, is the question, why is financial literacy not on this list?
Yes.
I don't believe it's an academic standard. I mean, it may be enveloped within one of these other standards.
Is it, maybe it is.
And I'm presuming, yeah, this is, we included simply the standard, so.
That's a fact within 26. Is it? Okay.
Oh, that's, okay, that's,
Yeah.
and just kind of like a point of clarity, so I know what's on my to-do list after the meeting, do we want to add another sentence? Another kind of idea could be adding a line here at the end saying that this policy will be implemented in accordance with governing district policy.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, that's not, I know we're working on the equity policy, and I know that will, a lot of policies will refer back to it, so I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Add that here at the end.
And I'm going to see this, but
I'm not, don't have a specific concern. I was just still trying to figure out what I saw, and maybe it's just the way this one ended as I go through the. They use that for, right?
let's look at it, add it in, and see what we can.
Yep, so I just made this change right here and in accordance with district policy under the guidelines.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Well,
We can. And then we'll hold,
the policy that we will get to will, once we go through all of them, then we'll move to the public comment, period.
Thank you.
Right, okay, I can move on to the next one is curriculum. Just some language, non-substantive language changes made for clarity in the beginning. The main substantive change is adding a requirement of the district curriculum plan to include provisions for instruction for several days of observation, including not limited to Constitution Day, Citizen Day, Arbor Day, the Bill of Rights Week. This came from a recent federal law that was passed a few months back. Just a legal change here.
All right, I had no idea there was such a thing as citizenship. So, you have a whole lesson plan now. How about that? All right, I have no questions or comments. So just-
I have one clarification under definition. At the very end, it says to result in the achievement of academic standards at the proficient level by all students. Could we put in there at proficient or above for all students? Like, just to reflect that.
Yeah.
Maybe And then my other question, under delegation of responsibility, it did say that the listing of curriculum materials shall be made available for parents, guardians, student, staff, and board members. Where is that list? Or is it? Like if a parent were to ask, where would one find that? Or do we request it from you?
So this is one of the most fundamental things that our director attention recommendation is doing clause cleaning that right now. So we're calling it a curriculum because we really do have a better sense of what when how to have all place. So that's sort of job one for
Gotcha.
at least.
And I just made that at or above change,
Thank you.
at or above the professional title here. I'll state that.
Can you talk about how to believe what we do that?
Sure.
I've got a question about that. I don't like trying to. Yeah. So I wondered, how is that assessed? Like, is that via a certain measure? Like the proficient, when we say proficient, is that, I mean, is that a PSSA score or is that what are we referring to?
This is in reference proficiency to the district's curriculum, correct? That's the point of this policy. And so it is in relation to the curriculum. As opposed to the previous policy was about the state standards, this one is about.
But when we say the proficient level, so that's not speaking to a certain measure, that's just saying in general. Okay. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when I read this, it seems to me like so our goal is that they meet the standard. And maybe this alludes to what you mentioned, Michelle. Like in my mind, when I read this, I think, what about innovation? What about, and that's where I did, also take a look at some other districts and how they handle this policy. And it does seem like innovation can be baked in, in the way that we word it. I just think is this consistent with our vision and our mission? It just seems kind of flat to me, honestly. And just something minor, when I read under the purpose, it says the curriculum shall be evaluated, developed, and modified. Would it make sense to say that it would be developed, evaluated, and modified? Switching up the wording a little bit, we're evaluating it first and then developing it second. That's just a minor thing. And then just one more point is just under the special observances. I was sort of surprised to see that in policy and not in AR. That seems so specific to me. Is there a reason why that's in the AR? I'm sorry, in the policy? My understanding of that is if that evolves and changes, then we would need to, or is this sort of just saying, for example? Although it's saying including but not limited to, I don't know. It just struck me as strange. It's so specific when normally the policy is general.
So again, some of these days of observance were named specifically in the federal law that was passed and it was recommended by PSBA.
Okay.
I mean, there is leeway here to observe to abide by federal and state law, any kind of day of observance.
Okay.
And I don't believe there is an AR to this. Policy, which is why
Just like they said, to comply with state and federal law, period. I mean, and then you guys think that if it changes, we don't have to pay that.
I think it's my mind to actually, especially these where there's no ones that are federally that are released. So,
From an audit perspective.
that was very
It would be easy to take down the line.
Oh, no, social studies teachers, don't forget.
Yeah. Not them again. But. Yeah, that's definitely. That's fine. It's arbitrary. It's like, it's not others about it. Was that all? That's it. Yeah, that's something. Did we, you didn't just say they could anything about it.
I'm okay with it.
Okay. All right, and Ms. Albert?
No, I just didn't know there's so many days and weeks. Oh, cats, okay. There's a special event.
Okay, so just to, so again, I know what I need to do. Are we, is the committee, do you want this at or above proficient level language? That's the first change. I made that one on the fly, so that's the change I made.
Is there other language you would want to maybe propose, offline that we could consider? Just based on what you were reading about innovation and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, sticking with that point, like when I read that, I just immediately think PSSA.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so I just wonder if it's gonna conjure, if that's the connotation. That's not what we need, but. Can we word it maybe? I don't know.
Do we run any risk if we open it up to running? Obviously, there's some other districts that have more expensive language. I would just want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in the position when it comes time to audit, that we're auditing to even proficient is subjective to a degree. How open do we want to make that when it's a policy and your adherence is subject to audit? Do we run a risk?
I mean, that's kind of a not.
Yeah, it's not so much illegal.
Yeah, not a legal
Yeah.
question, I think that's a committee administration should not like. I mean, I don't see it.
I mean, I think it seems like it's the type of policy we do want to make sure we first find rules. And so that, for example, if you have a policy that you submit, it gets stronger. I wonder if you might send that over, or we can take a look at it. I
I'm
mean,
not
it's
sure,
really.
so yeah, I have one pulled up right
Okay.
now.
You
I don't know how you want me to,
would email to me,
okay,
and then, or me and Dr. Sweeney, and we'll take a look at it, and then, we can count this as a first read and decide if we're back in first read, or if we can make some changes. Dr. Sweeney.
yes.
I have proficient or above. Since there's such a small population of advanced classes as pertains to the student population, is it proficient enough of a standard for this policy? Because that means that they met all the criteria. The above is I don't know why it needs to be in there. Because that opens you up into an audit of how many you have to break down the ethnicity of the people in the classes. So it could just open the door for inequalities being marked on the assessment that we're not meeting, because you're drawing, I mean, there's only a percentage of students that are in AP courses. And as of right now, if I heard you correctly in the meeting, you said that it was only to let the Black and brown children know about how to obtain getting into AP classes, and not necessarily them being chosen to be in AP classes, because they are above. They are above the proficient, but they're not being included into AP classes for systemic reasons, like, so I don't think that in a policy that you need to, I mean, I'm not I'm not saying that it's not in relationship to what you said. It's just speaking of the policy and how it would affect state audits of our school district and what is proficient, because advanced means mastery. And this is just the standard that kids will meet the expected, that they can read when they leave first grade. They can write, they know their mother and father's name, they know their address. You know, there are things that are part of the curriculum that kids are supposed to know before they go into second grade. But does that constitute if a kid is above and knows their grandparents' address and phone number and is more advanced, does that mean they skip to third grade?
So,
Please do.
so I think in the case of this policy, where we're talking about our students' progress relative to our curriculum, to me, it's helpful to signify what the or higher or more signifies is that proficiency is the floor of the ceiling. And that we do want our students to go as high as possible. And then to say that, you know, getting to proficient is, you know, is really the ceiling. I think sells our students short. And so I think the aspiration that I have for all of our children is that they're achieving at rates that are proficient or higher. And then this is something that has been true throughout my career, is that signifying that shows the dreams and hopes that we have for all of our children. Goes beyond just sort of getting just adequate or just, you know, enough. It's really making sure with every student's true capabilities and true destinies.
Exactly. It took, as you guys talked it through, I became not concerned about the audit part of it, because they're auditing to, like, just basically are withholding people to that the basic standard, the proficient standard. Yes, auditor checks the box, you got the policy, all that. And I do hear what you're saying, where we want to set what are our values, and that we just want everybody to be proficient. Publishing can be whatever you can be, but as before, like that.
So one small suggestion, it's just a tiny little thing that might just make me move past this PSSA focus, but if we were to change the at the proficient level to at a proficient level, would that be a little more improvements? So to me, the proficient level, just like I said, conjures this threshold in school that we want to reach. Whereas if we say at a proficient level or above it, at or above a proficient level.
I've had debates in my past life about proficient versus proficiency. And so, you know, I think what we're talking about more is level of proficiency, not me, like there's one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Proficient. So I think we can work with that.
I like to do that. Yeah, I can see the back of the
Same.
Yes.
Get past it.
Are you?
Where are you on the long term? All right. That sounds good.
Okay, so that's what we follow about that.
Yes,
Um,
right.
okay.
And again, we still will send an example. of
Oh, well.
Well, I have you guys say, so it's just for reference.
It's all work on the something.
Thank you.
Moving along to 320. This is your freedom of speech policy for employees. This policy essentially states the law, which is that employees do not shed their First Amendment rights at school, but also the district has interest in ensuring that employees are abiding by their duties and also not causing obstruction in school. So if either of those two things happen because of an employee's speech, the district could take action to potentially impact that speech or address that speech. And this is this models PSBA's recommended policy. And I will say too, some of this policy is, especially for freedom of speech issues, employee context and student context. There are also a lawyer's short answer is it depends, or it's on a case by case basis. But this is, I can't emphasize enough how true that is in freedom of expression or speech issues. So some of this policy is a bit gray or vague because of that. So I'm happy to entertain any questions. If there are any.
What does this protect the an employee from how they use their Facebook page? So can someone, if you have it public, go on there and pull a post that you have and send it out, and it can cause an uproar, but that wasn't your intention of making the post. It was for your friend group and your like-minded people. So
It depends. Yeah, in that situation, if that happened and that there was kind of an uproar because of the approach, the district would look at this policy and determine what action and pennies could be taken from the employee.
Then context to be specific.
Yeah. But yes, this policy would be implicated in that scenario.
but it
Yes,
doesn't give any protection.
It gives both protections to the employee and the district.
So it's like saying the district is not affiliated with the comment. It's just the personal opinion of the employee.
This policy wouldn't specifically say that the district's not affiliated with any of its employees' posts. That's not spelled out. I don't know. Could legally spell that out. That's pretty nuanced, but generally speaking, if there was a problematic online post, we would look to this policy. And it says that employees have First Amendment rights, but the district also has an interest in ensuring that employees are abiding by the duties and that full operation to run smoothly.
I did see some to that point in a couple of districts, there were references to your comments represent your personal views, not those of the district. And I, reading on, like, I read through that multiple times and just felt like it too kind of started down a little bit of a slippery slope of, in what situations would you have to acknowledge that you are not representing yourself as an individual, but you're not representing yourself as a person representing the district. I would never be doing that, you would think, on a personal page or post or comment and what have you. And yet some districts seem like they're trying to put like a box around that it feels way too difficult to try to use.
Yes, this policy does not
Does not
address that. I mean, I do agree that's something that I defer to the administration too. I think that would be, there are administrative hurdles with that.
Yeah.
Even if a post is theoretically private, it still can cause a disruption
Right.
to school, and
Right.
it could still tend to be a reflection of the district, even if we have language
Correct.
say
Exactly.
kind of like
It
greater
just-
beware, but
I do see that a few districts have that in theirs, and I just didn't seem to be helpful.
Well, I was gonna say, when I was reading through these and making notes, the one thing I mean, a note of was that the examples of things that come in both this are a lot more vague than they once were. And I think that's the point, right? Is that like, this is kind of a starting point and then says numerous times as necessary in consultation with legal counsel. So, you know, that's, if there is an allegation or some kind of issue, it's gonna come down to attorneys, you know, so I mean, I'm an attorney, but I think this is like general enough that that's what it needs to do.
I mean, my note is just that it feels subjective, but you address that, and the reasons why, I understand, so, thank you.
Thanks, no changes into this week.
And then shifting gears from freedom of expression to payment of bills. This one came up as a part of the standard review, 616. Just some language changes in the beginning. The kind of the big strikeout portion here was a requirement that bills had to have like check number, vendor description. Oftentimes bills aren't presented to the board like this, so we just struck that out because that's just not how it happens in practice. And in addition here, just stating that only a business administrator or designee can use the district sales tax exemption number. And if anyone's looking to use that, they have to get permission from business administrator or happy to entertain questions on this one. And then I believe there is another fund balance, 600 after this, so.
Any questions or comments on this one? Pretty straightforward.
So 620, and I believe that Duana had reviewed this policy as well, and she said that it looked good. This also came as a result of routine review. Some of these, it's kind of largely unchanged from the original policies. Some of the definitions are a bit different. They kind of come from legal and accounting practices. The main legal note here is that if there's any unassigned portion of a fund balance that they cannot fall below 8%, that's a legal requirement. And then there's a goal, there's kind of aspirational language here saying that it should not fall below 5%. That's kind of a goal, that's not a legal requirement. Maybe we could change that if wanted to. That was a suggestion that we had included. So I'll get any questions here. Definitions speak for themselves. They're technical, but.
So you actually just answered the question I have, which was I knew where the 8% came from, but the 5% threshold, which that one seems to be the number that I see, or the percentage I see in most district policies in our region. There were maybe one or two that were older policies that were tagged at 3%, and at 3%, they would have to take some action to go. That's feeling not enough. Understanding what we have coming up in our plan and adjustments that we're making, it would seem that dropping below 5 would potentially be problematic from the perspective. So it felt comfortable to me. I just was trying to place where it fit statute and not. So thank you for that clarification. So I'll just go down the line. Questions?
Can you put this in layman terms? This paragraph about the 5 and 8%, like for the everyday reader of this, like I'm not understanding. I guess because I'm not in the finance to understand I don't know what it's talking about.
So thinking of us as a nonprofit, that we don't, we're not in the business of making money. It's what do we do with the money that the revenue that we drive. And only 8% of it can be an unassigned balance. We looked at, we have to assign funding for curriculum and for transportation and all the types of operations of the district. That there's a not to exceed amount, in the legal, the state law is up to 8%.
Yeah.
Can't exceed 8%, and we are audited. And so, for example, we talked about this in the facilities meetings, that there was money that we didn't spend, projects that we didn't complete last year, so we have some rollover funds in this year's balance that aren't assigned because they were projects that we didn't do last year, so they go into an account called the unassigned unbalance, and they can then be reassigned from there. But we can't amass a war chest, we can't have a huge amount of money, we can go to 16% of our operating budget that we're just sort of holding in that, you know, a rainy day fund. It's not exactly a rainy day fund, but it's along the lines of just doesn't have a specific use yet. But it is a good thing for us to have money in our unassigned for expected expenses that come up, as well as to be able to plan for example, the high school project. So it's a good thing that happened. It's just that the state threshold is 8%. And I think that it behooves us to be able to go up to the 8%.
8% of what?
Of the total budget.
Of the total budget for the year?
Right, 105, say approximately $105 million, so 8%.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now it makes sense.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
8%.
What? Yeah.
I know, that's my dumb.
No, it's not at all. Appreciate the questions. Great.
Quick question about how this was developed. Was this developed, like you just said, with Thorwana? So this isn't like a PSBA one, and then going back actually to the Free Speech Free Association one, like that one you took directly from PSBA. So more broadly, when you have these kinds of, policies, are there other places that you look to, or is PSBA kind of like the go-to place? I'm just curious.
So to answer your first question, this does model PSBA's policy. And to answer your second question, typically PSBA is our go-to place. We also use kind of our discretion in thinking about the district's needs, thinking about what is legally best practice that we consider, and we make changes from there. So oftentimes it's not like we're doing a lot of kind of editing and thinking when we are putting it together. And so it's kind of like and some policies are often kind of different too. Sometimes we use the whole policy, sometimes we don't use a portion of it. Thanks. Good question.
We move that one then to a second read with no.
And this is a proposed service animals in school policy, which would apply to both employees and students who are looking to have an accommodation to use a service animal. This is derived from the Americans with Disabilities Act. These definitions, you'll note that there's a dog defined, miniature horse defined. That's from the ADA specifically.
Well, where did that come from? Somebody had a horse that they were using, like, it mentions it like twice. I'm like, is that why legally it was put in there, because somebody had a pony that they brought in?
I do not know why the law specifically references miniature horses. Like, I could do research into it, but to see kind of what the purpose of that was, but I imagine it.
I mean,
It can't be a cat though, it's not in the policy. I don't think the. Or miniature.
Yeah,
We've gone off the rails already.
Yeah.
Very good.
I can imagine that there's some kind of,
there was some kind
something.
of lawsuit.
there is some kind of something happened that the lawmakers decided to do.
It's like, make it easy. Girls it. Or the trainability.
Or that.
Yeah.
service.
I would love to see that happen. It's just, you know, put a dominated.
I think it's pretty fun. So it pretty much
Have
is
a
all.
pastor outside.
They have to be trained. It says they have to be trained. So this is all really coming out of the ADA.
Yeah, essentially the ADA, and this is partly from PSBA as well. I will say too, like kind of having researched this issue, like it is a little amorphous too. It's not. You kind of anticipate there to be more concrete guidance out there, but this is what we have, so.
There is one part where I've read it like 4 times and I still don't think I quite understand it. It's right before the delegation of responsibility. It's the paragraph right before that, and it's where it begins the second sentence. Pennsylvania law expressly protects the rights of handlers or trainers of service animals, access to public accommodations. And then it goes on to talk about puppy raisers and yada, yada, yada. I couldn't figure out what it is that we're protecting in terms of public accommodations for handlers.
So this is derived from law too. This is if someone were training a service dog and wanted to use something, a district field or potentially train an animal at school, the district would need to examine that request to see if we could allow it.
Seems like there's a word missing.
What sentence?
That second sentence.
Current Pennsylvania law, this one,
Between service animals and access, or let me say, they protect the rights. Rights of them to have access. To.
yeah, but I think it can say to have access. So I can make that say. Current Pennsylvania law expressly protects the rights of handlers or trainers of service animals to have access to public accommodations.
You know, to say, oh,
It's the definition of public accommodations that I've struggled with. What are those in the context of the law? Are we saying they're allowed to be in the building? Are we saying they're allowed to be on the grounds? They're allowed to use the restroom on there? Like, it's such a big term that, or maybe it's not. And people.
we got an IE, an example, or was that not?
So I believe, Kelly, like if everything you're describing is included, and Christian, to your point, can we give an example? I could see if the law has a definition of that to include. If I don't know if it does or does not, but I can see what the law says to define it. I just wouldn't want to include just the definition to include, but
Right.
I can try. If the committee wants me to look back, I can look back. I'll look into that. For clarity.
It has all this like language about puppy raisers and who they are and how old the puppy can be. It just. It has to be nice to me. That it's just one of those. Your products.
You know, to take it back a step further, so I noticed that our neighboring districts don't have this policy unless it's embedded in another policy. So I wonder, I mean, there's no harm in having a policy, First Street, they do, yeah, quite very diverse, yeah. So, but I mean, you know, although they do a lot of, well, there you go. Who knew? Just an observation, you know, a couple of, so Rose Tree, I didn't see that as well. I didn't see one for Springfield.
Well, this puppy raisers, that is puppy raisers, the place where most service animals are trained. Because why are they specifically saying puppy raisers?
Yeah, I believe that's how it's defined in the law. And I believe that term just is this like the volunteers who work with the dogs.
But in
Well, they have prisons now where inmates are training service animals.
So I wonder, is this paragraph necessary?
That's my,
Because I'm feeling like it's, I'm thinking about if I had to. I have a puppy raiser who shows them, yeah, that's insane, straight.
Not to be confused with a horse raiser.
But exactly. But, you know, when that, if that's only. Maybe reaching out to our attorney. This is not something that. I think our policy, there's a lot that's in law that we can't verbatim into into a policy. I think our policy really serves to publicly state what, you know, how we're gonna do a state law here. This is a detail that I think. I don't feel like a policy.
Right.
Yeah, we can. I can take that paragraph out, I think.
The
That
other
first
thing I
sentence.
just like about the paragraph, it says they're protected under Pennsylvania law, especially if. Like if they're protected under Pennsylvania law,
Right.
then there's no clause, right? Like if these things exist, like especially if, I don't, like that confused me.
Right. It's where it's we're approached.
Right.
We're just reaching out to our.
Yeah.
understandings.
Yeah.
Just-
I'm sorry, but
So maybe we should take it out.
Can we move to the AR or? AR is about the mission or service. You think it's needed?
I think it's. I think the policy can still stand without this paragraph. I think it's fine to completely remove it. I think it's fine to add it into the AR, whatever the committee would like.
I just think it's confusing.
Good.
I say we just scrap the whole thing.
That's all.
Yeah.
It doesn't help. For the team.
Yeah, it brings up too many questions like.
Yeah,
It's not.
we're all having this to be.
Okay, so I'm not add to the AR, so I can just, I'll just right now, in real time, delete.
Is there any other questions or comments about it?
Just to say, I did not have miniature horses on my policy committee being a part.
No.
So, I was reading this and I was like, what?
They gave me a chuckle.
We're having a good time with
I
it.
kept reading it, I was like,
Yeah.
is this like some kind of joke in here?
All right, with that change, then we'll move that to a second reading with that change.
Sounds good.
Moving to 8/27. Conflict of interest, the change here is also recommended by PSBA. Just to define, if the district were in receipt of, federal money as an often received from federal grants or et cetera, and note for what a conflict of interest looks like for federal purposes, which is specifically defined if, employee, board member, or another agent, if their immediate family or spouse or partner is, going to be with that organization, or they have some kind of financial interest in, whatever is up for contract. And then there's also, this deletion for public employee. Public employee was not referenced in this policy or elsewhere rather than district policy, so it wasn't necessary, so we recommend removing.
Questions?
Unless on the committee.
Just to clarify, so you had said that really this focuses on approval of a contract or a financial contract, so. Is that what you?
I would say generally speaking, this whole policy typically are geared out of, usually, I think conflict of interest typically come about in terms of financial reasons, Could there be other non-financial conflict of interest? Yes, and I think this policy would address that as well. And it also says too, has a financial or other interest in or an tangible personal benefit. Did that answer your question?
It does.
So is there any questions on this one?
No.
So, okay. Move this one forward then. So,
So our last policy is public comment. This policy sets parameters for how public comment should be run at public board meetings. There's language at the beginning, stating that copies of the agenda should be made available, but the main substantive changes are in the middle of the policy. The first is that this policy sets a time limit for public comment. We recommend that there be a time limit set, that's best legal practice. Here, we propose 30 minutes. That's not a legal requirement. Typically, with our clients and other districts in the area, we typically see a range from 3 to 4. The community is welcome to change that. And there's also notations here about examples of speech or comment that are not considered public comment and wouldn't have the protection of being public comment. So those examples are spelled out here. Any kind of harassment, profanity, hate speech. You'll see the second category of comment is confidential personal information regarding students or staff. That would typically apply if someone is talking about other students who aren't their own children, or confidential staff matters. And the end section states that if speech that doesn't follow these parameters can be the presenter could be warned that this content is not specific approved public participation in accordance with this policy. So the procedure set forth at the end. What we do if we think that this policy is being violated. So happy to entertain questions here.
I did have one, that maybe more than one, but I wanted to understand that disclosure of confidential personal information. I'm very clear about students, what that means with respect to students. With respect to staff, if a public commenter is offering comments, do we have a term defamatory in this one? We do not use the word defamatory. There we go, defamatory. So if we have comments coming about an interaction with the named employee of the district, in which the commenter is making allegations about their conduct of that specific staff member, that are negative. Or positive, I suppose, but let's say negative. Does that in and of itself constitute a violation of the policy as written?
If it's just a criticism of the employee or.
Criticism in terms of how they handle a situation that would be considered a confidential matter.
And the lawyers do answer and say probably it depends, and similar to the employee freedom of speech policy, like some of this, it is. Yeah, it is going to depend on a case by case basis, which is why this paragraph was specifically written to kind of potentially include.
Yeah.
All instances that could be allegedly improper. It's kind of hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what's good for it.
So to jump on your example that you just used about that would be an issue though that wouldn't reasonably come before the board. So could we invoke it from that way? Because we don't deal with discipline or specific staff issues, right? So that's not in our purview as board members. So that would not be an appropriate place to air the grievance. Am I correct in that? So let's say I show up at the board meeting and say, Mrs. Jones did X, Y, and Z to my Super Bowl Harper, and how dare she? I mean, I don't think it's appropriate, but it wouldn't, we can't do anything as a board to help Harper right this wrong, correct? So we could reasonably say, we're gonna cut this off because this is not an issue that would come before us as a group.
I think it's why it's helpful that we have an internal.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to be very.
Like, yeah,
type of situation.
right, that's what I was-
The first time.
Yeah.
Each year, then, where we have, Attorney Berna, who represents us in our board meetings, I've had a chance just to speak with him about this, so I've been contemplating this policy. Very, very consistent advice between both the hospital shop and so forth, posted about. There's not a upright line.
Okay. And to both those comments too, I think this is more so geared at, it's not necessarily what the board can do, it's kind of like what kind of speech is inappropriate, like hate speech, defamation, obscenity. And kind of like if someone was commenting about like an employee specific form of discipline, I think that would probably be confidential employee information. That would be that presented to the public.
Yeah, it does, because I think it, and what you just said to, Dr. Johnson, because I sit here trying to see your brain wants to create a bright line and something which there's not, because there is freedom of speech that, and that's what I was struggling with a little bit. If I was the board president sitting there having to make, I was feeling like that would be a very anxiety provoking decision I would have to make, so we would turn to the attorneys if we were wondering, were we getting up to that line? Okay. Okay.
So. I think that our board meetings have been a little bit loose on what they're allowing people to comment on when it's not on. When we do the second one, which is not even necessary, you only have to legally have them comment on what's on the agenda. We're doing a bonus to even open it up to comments that aren't on the agenda. And I think that this policy kind of helps the board be able to stay in control of the meeting. Because we have had instances where people have gotten up and the level of uncomfortable, you can see the other people in the audience are uncomfortable with what's being said, as well as board members, because there's nothing we can do but listen. So you're like, is the person just bringing this up because they want it on television and they're using the board meeting to perpetuate this? And so how does the board president interrupt somebody and say that you're violating a policy that do you know what I mean? Like, do they hit the gavel and say, we're gonna move on from this because this isn't a topic that is necessarily part of, it doesn't move anything forward. It's just a complaint. And the complaint should be taken up with you personally, and you have access, you give your cell phone and your business phone and your email, so they can't say that they can't reach you and you're accessible. So they could have said that from our last superintendent, but you have opened the transparency door. So, I'm wondering how we as a board are going to represent this policy and take back control of our meetings. Because a couple of times I've had to hold my pearls, clutch my pearls and to keep from saying like, you know, I think you're out of line. And you know, they are making defamation character assaults of our staff. And they're publicly discussing their child's issues. This clearly says that that's not allowed, but we've been allowing. So how do we turn back and take control of our meetings? Do we, at a board meeting, have you kind of summarized 903 to, as part of the standard for how the meeting is going to be run? And also, I want to make a motion that the 3 minutes should be up to 5, not to exceed 5 minutes. Because a lot of times, the 3 minutes, it's subjective. People tend to go over. They don't pay attention to Duana holding the sign up, and they continue to talk, and then they're rushed, and so their point is missed. And then some people take offense that like we're cutting them off because we don't really care what you have to say. You know, it's 3 minutes, and you know, if the board member could be daydreaming, like, so I just think like to allow more time for people to formulate their thoughts and present their issue without restraints. And 5 minutes isn't that long. And because we generally don't have that many people speaking, like and this policy says about repeating, like, so if somebody gets up and says something, we can't have 10 people all getting up and saying the same thing. You know, reading the same email that they sent, so.
So can we, do you want to take those kind of one by one? Because you offered a couple of things here. So the first part was about what do we do in enforcing the overall parameters of the policy. How would we respond if somebody was, if we believe somebody was not complying with what it says? How would we handle that? And I think that's correct me again, it wouldn't, it's not necessarily a member of the board or even the president. I think it's going to be the attorney present who's going to step in at that point to say, kind of interrupt, and that's happened once or twice before, where then we'll kind of interrupt and say, I want to just mention that we're in that territory where I think we're violating the policy. Is that generally how you think that's going to be?
I mean, in my experience, it's the board chair. It's the board chair who is making discretion, and having stronger language that helps the board chair. And I also think that that you know they're often turning to the attorney to decide. It's not always the attorney saying.
Yeah.
It's really the board chair. But,
Yep, yeah, and that's not a legal thing that can
yes.
be, whatever the board wants to be. I mean, there's some districts I go to for meetings. I'm the one who said, we're sometimes people who say, your time has elapsed, please move on to the next presenter. Sometimes the board president does it, sometimes someone else does it.
Right.
would be the board's decision.
It's not a policy.
Yep, and yeah, and this does say for policy, the presiding officer or designee, so that can be board president or the solicitor or other. This gives us the ability, and this would be the process. And that, to your point too, was what was the process? It was these 6 steps. So.
Then you asked, about the potential for discussing the changes to the policy, in the board.
From 3 minutes to
Oh, okay.
not to exceed 5.
Right. Okay.
So you're giving somebody the opportunity. If it's short and it's only a minute, then they only talk for a minute. But if it's something that merits a little bit more discussion, and I can only remember like when we had the policy meeting and Haven had the phone, they were cut off at 3 minutes. And luckily they had it so that the next person came up and continued on. They knew that they were gonna be cut off, so they planned it that way so that the point was made. But if the policy just says up to 5 minutes or not to exceed 5 minutes.
So I looked, I'll jump in. I'll remain open to hearing what everybody has to say. I'm not a fan of increasing the time limit, having been on the board as long as I have and sat through hours and hours of public comment, and having to at some point like call a recess because of things getting out of control, which I really don't want to repeat that. I did look, I couldn't find anybody that went up to 5. Sounds like some go up to 4. I'd agree with you, though, at the same time, we're ending up cutting people off. It's uncomfortable for everybody when we have to do that. I worry that by increasing it, all you're gonna do is have exactly the same thing happen, but at 4 minutes or 5 minutes instead of at 3 minutes. If something's important enough to come before the board, I think as an adult, not everybody's, many people are not comfortable speaking in front of an audience. But if it's that important, either orchestrating among your other colleagues that are coming forward or getting to the point. 90% of what happens after the first 60 seconds to 120 seconds is just rehashing the same thing over and over. So that's my personal opinion, but like I said, I'm open if people feel even strongly about this, I can be swayed that it's.
Well, then if it's not 5 minutes, it's not the norm, then 4 minutes. But the thing is that, again, our board is a little loose on enforcing the 3-minute rule is what I'm saying.
I got your point, yeah.
And so people talk 5 and 7
Instead of truly cutting off at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because the gavel is not being hit
Yeah,
that says you're done.
yeah, that's.
And Kyle is holding up a sign and Duane is holding up a sign and signaling, and the people just refuse to look over there.
I think it's.
So they just keep talking.
Right.
Maybe we need to re-examine how we sort of at 3 minutes. And because I agree with you, if we give them 5, then if we don't reevaluate how we're doing this,
Yeah.
they're gonna take 7. And, last summer in particular, all those comments went on forever. So I'm not in favor of upping it, but I do agree with you that we need to manage it, but I do.
So for me, I think it would help me if I could get clarification on how much of this is, are we referring to things like the Sunshine Act or something that we reporting on, or how much is within our, purview? And it sounds like maybe a lot of this is within our purview, is that right? Or And you know, just to. You know, taking a step before that, when I read this. You know, yes, we're saying we want it to be orderly and efficient, but a lot of what you read as you carry on with the policy is about. You know, harassment and inappropriate comments. I mean, for me, if someone took 4 minutes and. Is not harassing other people or being, I mean, I'm always interested, I know we all are in what our community has to say, it's just that sometimes it's veering into just, it's not constructive and it sometimes borders on harassing, to be honest. So I guess I'm saying two things here, but I would like to know how much of this is within our purview, and if it does refer to some kind of a legal requirement, could we reference that in the policy? Like I have seen some districts reference the Sunshine Act. I don't know if that's something we would consider or, yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, when I read this, it seems, like I said, less about having it be orderly and efficient and more about, being constructive and kind. I don't know.
Cause
For lack of a
I'm
better word.
almost to the point where we just take away that second comment. And just go to the agenda. And that eliminates all this other inertia that we get into, and then it doesn't make anybody feel uncomfortable because.
So,
Because it's not allowed in the meeting, and most boards. From what I understand, don't have a second comment. And it's not a legal. A legal requirement to have it. So why don't we consider, since we have this policy up, just taking away the second comment? And
so we did a civility policy, and I thought it was interesting that that specifically stated that it did not apply to public comment board meetings. I find that interesting. Is there a reason why that wouldn't, I mean, because it's, I'd be freedom of speech, I suppose, or something.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
to your point, Kristen, I think how you describe the policy, it is kind of like procedure driven as opposed to kind of like. The perfect, like, for under perfect parameters, well, how should every public comment kind of come across? I think it's hard to do that under the law. The First Amendment is pretty broad in
Mhm.
terms of what kind of comment you can give to the board. And it really is these kind of limited circumstances where the board has the legal authority to take parameters to impact that comment or cut it off. So I don't know if there's a legal way to I guess make this broader. I think is what I'm not hearing you ask if this could be like kind of broad. If this scope can be broadened, and I don't know if there's a way to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
I see what you're saying. I mean, are there references to things like the Sunshine Act though that would help to, in other words, would help sort of support why we're doing this? You know, that it's within our,
Yep, so there is,
or Robert's rules or something like that, or.
we don't cite specific law here, we have, I mean, I just did control F for law. I think the main point of that is that, comment can be interrupted or terminated only under limited circumstances such as when individual's commentary is in clear violation of law or board policy. The law, well, that would include the Sunshine Act. It also include the First Amendment. It is an option to name them. I think by naming them, you run the risk of making sure that every single law is in fact named. And that's why typically for best practice we recommend under the law, because we survived by all political laws, and sometimes there's
Yeah.
many, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but many just apply. Yeah, it's just the way it is.
Does PSBA recommend suggested policy?
Some of this, this is modeled after
It is. Okay.
PSBA's suggested
But
policy.
that's helpful to state too. I know, in other words, it's not just, our board, you know, feeling the need to create these parameters. This is something that's recommended.
Yeah,
Because again, I mean, I wouldn't want the message to be that, we don't, and it's stated in the policy, we invite community, but we want it. I mean, you know, I think part of the frustration, at least for me personally sometimes, is that some of what's shared with the board isn't necessarily within our purview to address. But it does lead us to ask questions that can be helpful, so. I think sometimes education about what the board does and doesn't do. We talked about this a lot. Might be helpful,
I
but-
think I asked that, could that be like, part of the superintendent's report that you just reiterate what is the that the board is just governance. We're not, like, we can't handle grievances, and so,
I actually think that might come better if the board chair were to ask the attorney to explain that, because I worry that if I were to say it, was like the superintendent could control the action of the board, and this policy isn't that I'm not a player in this policy in terms of enacting a public comment period. It really is the responsibility of the board. So I think the attorney explained to the public, the board about.
so maybe you could talk to Kyle
Sure, absolutely.
and have him,
But I'd like to chair to make sure. Well, yeah.
well, yeah, Michelle and Kevin in there. All right, but back to the time, so Kelly and Michelle are against increasing the time. How do you feel?
If we can follow the rest of the policy, I don't have a problem with increasing it. You know, if we can demonstrate that we are following the fidelity, I think that it would. You know, I think it's a rare scenario where we have, problems of people trying to talk for hours and hours, so I think as long as we can figure out a way to implement it. I'm okay with it.
So now we're split two.
Yeah.
Can I actually add just a comment? Yes, they another thing. I feel like public comment, whether it's at the, the beginning, the required one, or the end, the second one, which is not required by law, again, are both, eye-opening, educational. I really love having, people come and speak, whether it's at committee meetings or it's, in front of the entire board. But I think that this really is for the board, a little bit less so for committee meetings. But this is really the bigger board meeting that we're really talking about here mostly. I would really hate to not have the second one. Just because, we can't control it. That seems like, so we have to create some rules. We have to understand that humans are humans. They may come with the best intentions to stay within 3 minutes and it goes over a little bit. At the same time, it really is at the second time that we can get a lot of comments. And I would much prefer to have everybody aim toward 3 minutes. And if they come in a group and want to hand off their thoughts, that's a totally legitimate way to do it. But to at least aim for 3 minutes, understand that's the rule. And then but we can also be human on our part, and we don't have to be super mechanical and say, that's it, and make everybody, feel like I just need 30 more seconds, and but whatever, but at the same time, we do need rules. So I would prefer that personally, I know I'm not voting, I would prefer that we stay with 3 minutes and try to get people to organize their time, organize their thoughts, and aim for the 3 minutes, because otherwise they're gonna be aiming for the 5 minutes or the 4 minutes, and they're gonna go over on that. And I don't think that's 3 minutes is, bad, given that we have had numerous circumstances where large groups of people show up to speak about certain issues, and it's not gonna be the last. It's my,
I'm just, sorry, just not to interrupt, just to add to, the second comment period is required by law. If it addresses matters that may become by the board, it's going to by that time.
oh,
Oh, it is required by
Yes.
law? I thought it wasn't. I'm sorry.
I believe.
I
it
think
is.
we have been told, honestly,
That it
that,
wasn't.
that it was not required.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
I believe it is, and we can,
Okay. But I'm certainly, yeah, whether it is or not, I don't want to get.
Well, then we just have to have a meeting that we understand collectively what we are as a board and what we're going to accept as in the conduct of our meeting, and it might put pressure on Kevin or Michelle, who's sitting in, that has to say that this is not the place or time, for this comment.
exactly.
And then either point them in the direction of where they should take it, so that you're not just cutting them off.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
It's mostly a process issue at that.
so
point.
I'm just saying, how do we take this policy
Yeah,
out of just our committee?
sure.
So that the whole board is thinking on one accord and working on one accord.
I think we are thinking on one accord, and I think Kevin and I can discuss it, but I have no problem saying like, this is not an appropriate comment, and like, I think Kevin and I will have to discuss, but I have no problem with that whatsoever. because
Oh, I know you do.
Oh,
But Kevin,
all right.
Kevin is a little lenient.
It's funny considering it's his background.
Right, no,
She, at 8:30, she gets a little testy, so she don't have no problem saying,
So now let me throw one out there. I'm gonna totally derail things. Is there a way to add in? One of my concerns is that our staff feels protected, and I hate when people get up and start throwing out names. Is there a way that we could say like a complaint against an employee is not an appropriate, this is an inappropriate comment to the board, and it should be like taken through proper administrative channels rather than the board? I know that that's very specific, but and we can talk about it later if we need to, because it is in 8:30. But that's one of my concerns, is that we go down this rabbit hole of like, oh, I'm mad at my kid's teacher and I'm gonna come here.
You want the legal,
Yeah.
my initial legal thinking and the license policies, I don't think you could specifically list a complaint or a concern regarding staff.
But we have a recommendation in an AR that if they have a complaint with a staff member, that they should get through the proper administrative channels.
because we only govern. That's our fallback. That's the truth of what the board does. We don't,
I think the issue is that even if we intervene inappropriately, it doesn't matter if it's in the AR or in the policy. And so what we've attempted to do with this policy is to describe, personal matter, we go to students or staff. Is, on this list, but like we talked about already, it isn't crystal, there's not a bright line. And so, I don't know if there's any consideration of that one, of that item, but.
Number two.
Any further specificity to add to it, again, that doesn't cross over the line. Or is this?
I mean,
is this
this,
correct?
this was from PSBA, and I will say, this language was not just, okay, let's take PSBA's word for it. It was very deliberate and intentional, because I think there is, and what everyone is describing, I think it would be very hard to limit just general complaints or concerns against employees, even if it may be outside of what an agenda item is or what the board can act on. I mean, I think that would be difficult.
Thought, maybe, what if you were to, in that section? When we invite public comment, we have like the litany of the scenes that we read of all of like the things that we're to follow. But is there a way to maybe work in, at, when we offer that, this is gonna work, or in closing? A statement from the board chair that says like, we want to encourage members of the public who have, a complaint or a concern to please always be using, the proper protocol to seek remedy or seek to understand. And those include, your best practice is always going to be to work with that person individually. And there's a chain of command within the district up to the superintendent, and just start to remind people more often that like you should be using those channels. Now, folks that are coming sometimes have done all of those things, and they have yes, we just govern, and sometimes we use the word just in that. I do too. But the reality is if people are coming to us and you start to see a consistency across a group of people expressing concerns, we now have like something that's bigger than just an individual argument about something. But anyway, I'm just offering the maybe.
But that's something that we discussed in an executive session on how we're going to handle that person's, the response to that person. So whatever Kevin is going to say, or Michelle, if Kevin's not there, then we know ahead of time as a board what is gonna be said, and that we all agree. It's not like we've taken a vote, but we have presented it, so it doesn't catch us by surprise.
Yeah, we know the procedure that we're gonna use. Yeah, I think, I'd like that. We need to all, what is the procedure? We recognize that we've had some challenges with this. How are we gonna do it? How are we gonna try to hold ourselves accountable to it? And then I think too, that we probably do need to look to Kyle or whoever's gonna be representing us in the meeting. I personally would like to see more direct, like, it's thanks for them, but it is always really uncomfortable if you're chairing the meeting to try to cut people off, even if we know that's the policy. It feels wrong, it feels bad. Sometimes people say nasty things about you when you do that in the public sphere, and that's happened. So if, the attorney seems to give a little bit more weight to it and take it off of the shoulders of the board chair, that would be helpful if we could ask her.
Great.
Okay, so we're still back to 2 and 2 on the time.
That's a committee, and everyone's looking at me, but that is a committee decision, not the legal one.
Yeah, can we just put the to next month? As Rachel just said. Right, it's just a first read, so we can always, if we wanted to, next month. I mean, that would be a significant change.
That gives you time
Gives us time to figure this
to
out.
ponder,
Right.
given conceding the minute.
Yeah.
It gives you and Kelly time to consider conceding the minute.
Okay, all right, let's come back to it, revisit it.
Yeah.
We did it, we're done with.
So let me just, I just want to make sure that we have everything noted in here properly. So academic standards, there were some changes we were going to make there. Or maybe already.
I think Christine was going to suggest that.
Oh, this was this was added in accordance with district policy. I think this was sufficient.
Okay.
Yes, so this is, okay, and then the curriculum. I think we wanted the administration to rework this paragraph or some language in here.
Yes,
Add
yeah.
proficient.
This is something.
What's been said that?
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Proficiency.
That one's a bit funny.
that's the 105.
So are we thinking not moving that forward then to the board for a first reading?
Well, we could make the change now and then send it for second reading. No,
Well, I mean, I guess the question is that a substantial enough change that it would have to come back, I think, for first reading? I would say it's probably not. Like, we could move it to the board as a first
Yeah.
reading, even once we make this change.
Yes, the group wants the change, so, yes.
And then I think there was also a note about, changing the order of, under purpose of developed, evaluated, and modified.
I think I did that too. Develop, and that's the right word, develop, evaluate, and modify.
Correct.
Good.
So, okay, so we can move that forward. Freedom of speech, we are moving forward, no edits. The goals, we're moving forward with no edits, fund balance, no edits. Service animals, many questions, but no edits. Conflict of interest, no edits, and, public participation in board meetings.
Tina, we did get rid of that one paragraph in the service animals.
Yeah, right here.
Yes, yeah, I had to take that last back, and that was done already.
Yeah.
And then public participation in board meetings. Question of 5 minutes versus 3 minutes, or 3 minutes versus 4 minutes, still means. But again, we think that that can also be handled as a non-substantive point clarification.
Yeah, it'll give some chance to for the board members to weigh in when we can have that conversation.
So we can, so we'll move it as
And
in
potentially
currently
post it.
stands at 3 minutes.
Yeah, and it'll have to come back
And then have that conversation at the board meeting on policy.
so at the board meeting, I move
You
to,
You can offer, yeah, when you open it up, I'll make sure that we're opening it up for comment, of course, before we. Well,
You
no,
can't
that-
move to make a change, it wouldn't be a.
It would be
motion to say, at the, actually, when we do our second reading, I'm going to make a motion to move it to 4 to 5. But not at the legislative meeting. You just get comment on that.
we're not, we're. It would have to come back to the committee anyway, so you'd be offering your comments about what you want to see and a change to it, and other people can comment on it too, then. It was one. Yes. Okay, now can we go to our
Yes.
community member for?
Just a minute, with the 3 minutes versus 1 minutes, can you do like a soft stop at 3 and then a hard stop at 4? Or is that too much to like, that's not what it does it, so. I don't know, I think that the 3 minutes is good. There's sometimes people need a little grace.
Right.
We do. No, I know you do, I know, people are speaking, don't see it that way. So, but they're getting cut off, not me.
Yeah.
Other people.
That's why we don't like to do it.
No, I feel like you're right, like you guys should come in, somebody else should cut them off. Not you, anyway. You guys are the best. A lot of hard work.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Anything else? And close the meeting. It is 8:24. Our next meeting is October 7th. Same time. Look forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
5 minutes.